Free Friday webinars. I'm Shelly, your hostess, and this is Roscoe the Pug. And we're here every Friday. Thanks to American TESOL. It's absolutely free. You can download a certificate of attendance, so feel free to come and also invite others inside your building or at your school and let others know about it. We have done over 100 different topics. There's a recording for all of them, and you can download the slides, and you can also get all of the resources. And so we'll begin. Today we're going to talk about spicing up that lecture, because I know for a lot of us, sometimes we get on social networks or we learn about new technologies or we learn about many different tools, but a lot of our curriculum sometimes is full of lecture. And I remember when I first started, I had a lot of different times that I had to lecture as well. A lecture isn't necessarily something that's about an hour long or anything. A lecture can actually be something, it's any type of speech or talk that you give your students. So it might be what you use often when you're explaining a task or when you're introducing them to a project, or you want them to learn about the topic before they do a paper or anything like that. And that tends to be the time that I used to do lecturing. I started lecturing more, I think, when I was with older students. So I've taught graduate students. I've taught from 2 years old to 80 years old. And when I was working with teens, I noticed that sometimes I would get a little wordy, or sometimes I might enjoy the sound of my voice a little too much. But I think that's quite normal, actually. I think that a lot of us, when we first get out of school, we end up out of college, and we're still new teachers, and we're really excited about our subject, that we just want to share everything that's in us. And so we tend to have this where we lecture. So I don't want, if you do lecture, I just want to give you some tips so that way you can go and you can make it more active, because there was a research study from the Science magazine that came out, and they actually did this study with Harvard and in many different universities. What happened was the undergraduate students, they did this study of over 250 students. They did not include the online lectures at that point, but what they did was they ended up finding out that the students that were taught by lectures were 1.5 times more likely to fail than those involved in any kind of active learning. Like Peggy puts inside the chat box, a lecture is usually one-way communication. Definitely, that is what it is. But I'm going to give you some tips so that way if you do have a lecture and you just don't have the time to change it up, it's okay, because you can do these things really fast, okay? And then you'll actually be able to work with your students, and you'll be able to get them to remember the information better. And one of the reasons why is because when we are listening to something, and even if you're the most fascinating person, and one of the people that I really love listening to is Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I learned so much from him. He has such an incredible mind. The problem is that the brain can't soak up all the information. So this Harvard professor, who's been initiating active learning at Harvard University for many, many years, has been telling many of the professors, that they should stop lecturing and they should be more active. So, and he says it's almost like an ethical imperative for that as well. So you can imagine that could be pretty tough, because that's what college professors do. So there's a few simple tips that actually are very, very good, that the article suggests, and the article is within the bookmarks as well. So one of them is change it up every 10 minutes. So if you want your students to really be able to process the information, then the brain, most attention spans are up to a limit of 10 minutes. And that's if they're really interested. If you are not that interesting to them, if they aren't as infatuated with you as I am with Neil deGrasse Tyson, then you're going to have to actually change it up a bit more than that. The other part is if you're working with little kids, and the younger you go, the more likely, the shorter the attention span. So it's important, especially with little kids, for their development when you're teaching like 5-year-olds and toddlers. It's important that we just don't talk to them a lot. It's important that we actually get them active. And if you do this, one of the benefits for doing this is that it's going to improve your classroom management, because what happens a lot, and especially with teenagers, and I know some of you today are teaching teenagers, is teenagers, they get very, very restless, and they actually sometimes get very tired if they're sitting too long, and also not like the brain's not actively being tested or challenged every 10 minutes. So it's important. It doesn't mean you have to do necessarily as something extravagant. Here are a few things that might help you really quick with changing it up so fast. One of them, and I've mentioned this before, is GoNoodle.com. Now, GoNoodle.com gives you brain breaks, okay? So what it does is it's free. You put it up there, and it'll have them exercise. Teachers absolutely love Brain Noodle. They're quick and fun little games, and they're already prepared for you. So if you go to GoNoodle.com and you've already you can go to the videos and things like that, and you can just play one really fast, and that gives your students enough of a brain break so that way you can go back and you can talk about it later. Now, something I didn't mention in this webinar that I kind of should have, but I didn't want to. I'm not necessarily a person who would, now that I know, and now I've had the opportunity to develop my curriculum. I've had the opportunity to make more task-based lessons, more activities, and I realize that takes time. So if you are with a lot of presentations, PowerPoints, things like that, one thing that I did have students do is, as far as when you're lecturing, and if you're already doing this with some of your lessons, if you have them do visual mapping, if they're doing some kind of task while listening to you, their brain's going to soak up that information more. So a lot of times, if you have them taking notes in a colorful, that's what visual mapping is. They actually do colorful types of note taking. They make it into mind maps, and they can put little cartoons or little symbols and draw it to represent things. So that's one thing you can have them do as well. You can, to change it up as well, to make sure that you change it instead of like yes, exactly, perfect. Peggy says visual mapping is doodling with a purpose. Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So when you do, for example, a Pecha Kucha or Ignite is a shorter presentation. So if you happen to do one of these formats, your students would think it's really fun. Now, another thing I didn't put in here, which I really think is a great idea, is you can have your students teach. When you have your students teach, then you can have them do Pecha Kucha or Ignite. Now, the reason I didn't put to have your students teach is because, in general, it doesn't matter who gives the lecture necessarily. I mean, yes, I'm going to be more fascinated with Neil deGrasse Tyson teaching science to me than I am maybe a regular science teacher, because, you know, he just blows my mind. Or Carl Sagan, or, you know, Bill Nye the Science Guy. But if your students take on that role and you have them, sometimes we think when the student goes and the student starts presenting that makes it better, and it does, because that student learns a lot, but it's still a lecture. So I didn't necessarily want to put that, but if you do it in these shorter formats, if you do, for example, an Ignite session is 5 minutes, you basically have 15 slides, 20 seconds each, and they're automatic because PowerPoint has that automatic timing. I've done quite a few of these. Every time I travel, I've been to 26 countries, they ask me to do a Pecha Kucha. These things are absolutely frightening. I actually get more scared of doing these than Keynotes. It's 20 slides, 20 seconds, but it's so much fun. You really do learn how to be concise and how to be a really good presenter. Another, it, one of the problems with lecturing that I have is that when you do lecture, I think you have to really express how much you love your subject. And that's something that doesn't necessarily come out. I've had experiences where I've trained teachers and I've asked them, could you work with my English language learners? If you do a lecture, I need you to provide visuals. And I used to have in the high school that I taught, teacher, well, at least one teacher who didn't even have slides. He would just talk. And it was so difficult for my language learners to be able to process what he was saying. They just couldn't understand it. And so I ended up, he didn't want to add even any visuals. But my suggestion would be make it like a TED Talk, because TED Talks tend to be very short, 10 minutes, and they're very inspiring. And if you love your topic, it should really show. When we want our students to really get excited and curious. We want them to want to study English, or if it's something like grammar, we want them actually very, at least curious. And the only way to do that is if we have that feeling in it. So if you're going to talk about something, then do it with some passion and excitement, so that way your students can kind of catch that fire as well. There's some other things that I've done that have worked really well. Demonstrations and experiments. I used to teach science for a while, and sometimes I would start. One of my favorite ones was the sink and float. And this I actually learned on one of the cartoons that I saw, Blue. Yeah, Blue, the dog. And so what you do is you get this big tub of water, and what I would do is I'd have a cart, and I would bring the cart in, and that would have whatever it was that I was going to demonstrate for the day. And so I would put the cart, I would have the clear bucket of water, and then I would have objects, and then I would have the students do like a KWL chart, or they would do prediction charts. Actually, they would say what they thought was going to sink and what they thought was going to float. And then I would actually call individual students and I'd say, hey, is there something around you that you would like to try? And they could try their eraser, they could try their pencil. And so I made it active, but it was also an experiment. They were already thinking in their mind. They were putting in their mind what they thought. They were predicting. And if you have them do that, you're sparking their critical thinking as well. I'll share with you afterwards about the visual mapping. I actually have a couple of examples that my students have done. So you can see the pictures of them. And I think we did it for a brainstorming session, actually. But you can do that with demonstrations and experiments. Another one that I used to do, we used to get film canisters, and we used to put sometimes like some water and the Alka-Seltzer. And so I would put this and say, what do you think is going to happen? And in seconds, it would just skyrocket. And it was just kind of fun. It would wake the students up, and they would just be really excited for what was going to happen. But you can do that with other things as well. I do this a lot when I teach prepositions. I'll come and I'll bring, a box or something, and then we'll do a demonstration where kids will come up and they'll each take turns, and they'll have to model what I'm asking. So, for example, if you say, put the dog above the box, then they have to go and they have to take and show you what that is. So you can do it for other subjects and topics as well. So there's a book called Teach Like a Pirate, and kind of suggests you can do really cool things like making room into, like, if you're teaching about prohibition, you can make your room sort of like a really quiet and kind of model that atmosphere, and kind of have kids where they have to whisper to come in. And some teachers are really good at that. Some teachers are fantastic at acting. And if that's you, then and you teach something like, you know, a lot of times when we teach, they're great historical figures, or even if we're teaching English, they're great characters in a book or novel that we can really model and we can have come alive for our students. So if that's you, if that's something that you're comfortable with, I know teachers who are amazing at this. Amy Burball. Amy Burball is a history teacher. She was also a keynote for an online conference that Peggy, George, and I organized together, which is called the Reform Symposium. And she is amazing. She does all of these. She acts like Lady Gaga sometimes and comes with these dresses that are really nice and talks about history. And she's fantastic at that. So if that's you, if you like to dress up, I know a professor in Ireland, and she does this with her online classes as well. She comes up, she puts a lab coat, and she becomes this other character. So it is really quite something that will catch your students' attention. If you're comfortable with this. If you're not, and that, I think that's one of the things when you're looking at these different types of suggestions, make sure that you're always you. Do something that you're comfortable with, because if you do something you're not, then students can really read into that, and they'll and it'll just end up being something silly that they might laugh at. But that's okay if they laugh a little at the beginning. You kind of have to expect that, especially if you're teaching teenagers or boys of any age. Another one that you can do is integrate different types of humor. You can begin yours with a joke, or one. And I was actually in college. One of the great memories that I have is I had this college professor, and so she would do lectures on art history. And yes, you know, she put a lot of pictures. So, for example, we would study different statues, right? I mean, sculptures throughout the time. And we had one of, for example, and we had one about um, this of David. Okay, so we had the sculpture of David, and she would always put two against each other so we could kind of compare. And that in itself really gets the brain thinking. So just her having two pictures compared, she had like the David, and then she had a more modern sculpture, was really good. But the thing about the humor is, then the next slide, and she was about this little 80-year-old lady. She's really tiny and she's so cute, and she would, in the middle of all of these sculptures, you would see like David Hasselhoff come from Baywatch, and she'd have a picture like that, and she'd say, "How did that get there?" And it was really funny because she was lecturing, but just that little interruption of humor really got us to remember. I still remember those lectures. So I think that something like that, where you just add maybe a funny picture, and it could be something like a crazy cat, or often I have Roscoe. Now, a lot of people always asking me, they're saying, is that really professional to have Roscoe? But a lot of my students actually remember things because Roscoe, I'll have him in a shatter picks, or I'll have him in a jacket, and he introduces it. So like if I go and I introduce, for example, a verb or an adverb or anything like that, that's not very interesting. But if I get Roscoe to demonstrate, they remember that. They actually pay attention, and they think it's quite funny. So humor can go a long way. We actually, part of the bookmarks is one of the webinars we did on humor, so you can get plenty more ideas on how to do that. The thing you got to watch out about humor is that, especially you teach language, is it doesn't translate well all the time, so you've got to watch what kind of humor it is. And it also, it's there are some that are appropriate for age groups and some that aren't. For example, sarcasm. Sarcasm would be one of those really difficult types of humor. You would have to use that with older, because the younger kids would not get that at all. So it's important to pay attention to that. When you're doing a lecture, or even when you're doing a speech, like even here, one of the great things is that, you know, Peggy, Alex, you know, Lori, Josh, all of you are saying things. You're adding your input in the chat box. So when you're doing that, then you're more apt to listen to the presentation. So always get input, and there are some great ways that teachers have started getting input. You can throw a ball around. I've seen teachers do that, where they throw a ball around and they ask questions in the middle, or do recaps every 5 minutes. You can add input by doing a polleverywhere.com. I forgot to put clickers here. I kept meaning to put clickers. Oh, well. I'll just tag that in the bookmarks. But Poll Everywhere, you can use any device, or they can use their computers, and they can go from anywhere. They just enter a keyword or a code, and you can give them these different types of polls within the within your. I've seen a lot of keynotes do this as well, and it's really good. It's good. It gets the brain thinking and stuff. And then also you can see what everybody else says. So that's one of the great things about polleverywhere.com, is that it's a really simple, quick way to make polls and then to get them set up, and your students can go ahead and ask. Students of all ages, and I'm saying even the tough ages, when you're talking about 11 and 10 and 12, where sometimes they're just not very interested in a lot of things, love Kahoot. They absolutely, Kahoot is this trivia game. And what it does is it takes any information that you're teaching, and you create a trivia game. You can drag and drop. They have so many pictures, information. It times it. The students are on the leaderboard. They're racing to get the answer right, and it shows them the score. But one of the great things about getkahoot.com, and let me tell you, of every technology or web tool, and by the way, all these web tools are free. I only share free things because, well, for 99%, because I know teachers have a tight budget. So get Kahoot. It works on any device. It's really great because after you do this trivia, the thing I love about it is it asks the students to make their own trivia game. And if they're making their own trivia game, I think that's really, it's one of those where research has shown that if you teach a subject, you remember it more. So if the students are using the information they just learned from your lecture, and they're putting it and creating a Kahoot with it for their peers to take, then they're really learning that information. So I think get Kahoot, and all teachers from all over really rave to me about this. They really say, wow, get Kahoot is our favorite. So if you want your students motivated, use get Kahoot. I like infused learning. Now there's Socrative, and I didn't add Socrative here because Socrative and infused learning are pretty much the same thing. But I kind of prefer infused learning, sorry. But you can do Socrative. A lot of teachers really love that as well. What it does is it makes it to where your students, you can even get them to work in pairs to answer questions during your lecture, or they can even draw. They can add an answer as a drawing. They can do a poll. They can do a quiz. You can have them do multiple choice. They have this really cool one where it's like a space race, and you see which team gets the answers faster. So all of these are recalling information. They're reviewing information. But while so if you have to drill it, and you have to teach, like with the lecture and things like that, it's good to assess them regularly, and infused learning makes that really easy. And it works on every device. It works on Android, so a lot of the resources I also share work on all devices. So get Kahoot, infused learning, and the other ones that I'm about to share work on each device, even your laptop, even your computer, okay? Back channel. This is me. I'm using what's called a Padlet, and this is what I use often. I often back channel when I have to talk to students. So I'm teaching teenagers in Croatia here, and what I'm having them do is add their different types of stories and pictures while I'm kind of sharing with them for 5 minutes, what they have to do. So this is what Linowith is. It's a sticky board. I'm going to show you the other one that I really love a lot too. But these are so amazing because your students don't even have to register. So if you need something quick, if you have where you do have to have the internet, but your students have where they can even share like a laptop or anything, they can contribute on Linowit.com. And I really love Linowit. It works on all devices. It's not as pretty as the next one I'm going to show you, but you can add links, you can add videos, you can add pictures. You yourself, they don't have to register. All you do is you create the wall, and they put little Post-its on it. They just click on the wall and a Post-it comes up. And the great thing is that you just give them the link, and then you can go and make it private later. But I think that this is one of the fastest ways, one of the fastest ways to really be able to have students give feedback. What I use all the time. In fact, Linowit is the tool that I use most because I'm always on the go. I always forget to do things, and it's really fast to do, and I don't even have to get my students to register. Lately, though, I have been using Padlet, and I love Padlet because it's prettier. They give you a little bit more options. It's not as stable as Linowit, but Padlet is really beautiful. It's really nice. And the other thing I like about Padlet is you can make it password protected. So if you're one of those teachers that's like, I need them to always be safe and things like that, which is great, then I always figure, not anybody's going to know the link unless I share it with them because it's a very unique link. So then I go and I make it private later. But with Padlet, you can just have a password. So when they go to the link, they just type in the password really quick, and they're there and they can contribute. You can use those especially when you're showing a video. So if you happen to be showing a video too, then it's a great way to get students to answer. You can put little stickies. One color represents all your questions, and you can color coordinate the Post-its. So that's something important because then that'll identify what's a question, what's an answer. Perhaps all the orange is a question, and perhaps all the light blue is an answer or their feedback. So you can interact with that back channeling as well. If you use Padlet.com, now there's a free iOS app for it, an iPad app, but if you use the web, this is only with the web, you can get your students to make a mind map with you. So you were asking earlier, Josh, what kind of the mind mapping looks like, and that is what Padlet allows you to do. You can add YouTube videos, and you can see here my students there. You can see their names, different highlights. You can make this look in different ways, and the great thing is they can look for pictures to supplement. They can add YouTube videos. They can put different types of wording on there, and so you can constantly be asking them, and they can all contribute to the same mind map. So I look, if you're putting it up in the projector, it does make it interactive because they're actively researching. And I think when you do lecture, that's something you want to do, is you want to go and you want to have your students actively curious, actively doing something. And so Padlet makes it really easy to do that. I love Padlet. Now they can even draw within the little nodes. So there's so much you can do. You can add a link. And so often, teachers say have a Google moment. Well, I like having a Google moment where you stop in the middle of a lecture and then you ask them, okay, go and do a quick search, see what you can find. An example of, let's say you're teaching about animals in the art, animals in winter climates, okay? And you can have them go and they can research that, or reptiles or dinosaurs, and they could all contribute something to that. Somebody might contribute a YouTube video of a dinosaur. Someone might an infographic. Somebody might do a website they saw, a picture. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. Todaysmeet.com. So this one, it's a good one because you can add text and stuff. But I think as far as back channeling, yes, it's private, it's safe for teachers and everything. I prefer more visual things like Padlet or Linowit or Padlet, but a lot of teachers love having that as well. So a lot of times in between, like I have to give a lot of speeches, and that is in itself a lecture. I have to give often keynotes and stuff. And I learned from one of the people I really respect as far as keynotes. He taught me a lot about keynotes. I had to actually do keynotes with him, and that's Ken Wilson. He's really big in ELT, and Ken Wilson does the type of keynote where he gets everyone moving and active and doing things. And for me, for a long time, I kind of struggled with that kind of because it's not the same feeling as a workshop. But I think I've learned how to do it much better. So this is actually me in Sweden, and I do this toilet paper activity. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about social networks, so then I'll get a group of people to come up and demonstrate. And so you can get them moving, and now I get them doing little icebreakers, and so you can do that when you're doing your lectures. You can get them to do things that supplement or support what you just talked about. So you can, and the students really love this a lot. So there's so many, and what I did was I went ahead and I put in the bookmarks the digital icebreakers that we already had in a previous presentation. But in the middle of your presentation, that's something you can do. You can inspire with a quote. And, you know, that's one of the things is they have so many great memes. They have so many great pictures. You know, Andy Boone here, this is him in Japan. And, you know, your students, just because you're learning about Shakespeare doesn't mean that you have to just make it boring. You can put something quite wonderful. Yeah, exactly. Peggy says quotes and cartoons are great for that, and comics. So you can, you know, your students are more likely to pay attention and think that this is a really funny way of introducing you know, Shakespeare, instead of just making it very if you're not having fun with it, you know. You can play music, and I know some teachers that are really great with a guitar, and they come in and they use the guitar, and they really have a great repertoire with their students, and that's who they are. I know some teachers who have their students play music. One of the people that I met, a teacher in Turkey, I went to a workshop of hers. Her name is Evab2001 on Twitter. Eva Bilieski. She does this whole thing where she actually plays classical music. So she's talking about different topics, and she's teaching her 11, 12-year-old language learners, and she'll play classical music, and she'll have them think about, for example, she has them think about, okay, what kind of a movie would this be good for? What would happen in the beginning scene? What would happen in the middle? And so she does these breaks, and I think it's really great the way she uses music. But if you use music, you can play music to learn a lot of things. You can even find a lot of things within music itself. You can create a scene, so you can change up your classroom environment. So when your students come, and I saw this in Jamie Keddy's blog, and I think it's just genius, is he put, you know, just masking tape on the floor, and his students came, and this is what they saw, and then he sparked a discussion. He's asking them, okay, and he says you can do it chalk, you can put butcher paper there. I mean, you can change things up quite a bit. And then your students, when they walk in, they're automatically, their minds are challenged, and they're open for, hey, what's going on, teacher? Why is something different? And one of the best people who was really good at this, who did lecture, unfortunately who passed away recently, was Robin Williams. If you notice, Robin Williams, when he's teaching in the Dead Poets Society, one of the reasons why we really like Robin Williams is because he's always changing the environment. He's always creating a scene. He gets his students to get up on their chairs, and then he has them recite, you know, Carpe Diem, and he does the voice, and he's very good, you know, he's getting them to rip the pages. So there's so many things that you can just do with your body, with your actions, with your voice, to really make your lecture, your topic, come alive. There's so many different things you can do. I've only covered a little bit, and we're running out. Well, we actually already ran out of time. So let me go ahead and show you some of the things that I've seen that great teachers do. Jason Levine, Fluency MC, he starts his with raps, and that's his thing. He has raps, and then he has the students go and they say different types of words, and he integrates that in the rap, and he does it on different types of language learning topics. I've seen teachers who love using videos. They use short film clips. You can use audio bites. I've done this before where I've had noise in the background and I've asked students, okay, can you identify where I am at? Can you identify the conversation that's going on? So you can do that and introduce it that way. You can use puns. John Spencer, another great teacher, he teaches English this way, and what he does is he has a pun that's really funny, and it's just really, really interesting, and it makes you laugh. Memes. There's so many great memes out there, and we have webinars for all of this. We have a webinar on just memes. We have a webinar on here it's digital prompts, so you'll find puns. You'll find one on music. I think we even have one on magic. Brain teasers. Some teachers like to go and they introduce math that way. They have like a riddle or something that students have to solve. You can change up your lecture if you're with little kids and you have to do a lecture or something, you're teaching about animals or something. You can have a puppet do it instead. You don't have to do it, the puppet does the lecture. You can add drama, you can do realia. Figure out what it is, and you can see a lot of teachers do what they do, and they do it so well. But be you, figure it out. With maybe an interest or a hobby, and then that's what you do. You're the person who maybe, you crochet while you're, that kind of integrates that in the lesson planning. And the great thing about it is when you do that, it makes it fun for you, and that's what really translates. If you love what you're doing, and if you're not bored by your own lecture, you find it really interesting and you want to spark curiosity, because that's what you want to do every time that your students are with you. Whatever topic, whatever subject, even if it's something like adverbs or something that you think, no, they could never be interested in that, we can spark their curiosity. It's all in the way you present, and you might as well do it with passion. This is one of the most interesting ways that I have seen a teacher introduce math, and I thought it was really funny, and I think it really goes to that point of being you and finding it is what you like. And so what he does every once in a while is he does these optical illusions, and he also did this, you can watch the video, and he has his own shadow follow him, and he tells you how to do it. It's this magic trick that he does, and it's really interesting, and it's really funny, and you can hear all his students laughing, and they just love him. So I definitely think you should check it out. There's a lot of ways. So even in the design, one of the reasons I got hired, or they asked me to do this American TESOL and why I keep doing it, is because sometimes when you go to online presentations, you see that they're very boring. And here you're not going to get that. Here you're going to get this little pug coming in, or you're going to get some colorful, visuals and things like that. And the reason why is because I love what I teach. I want you to be very interested in it. I want to capture your attention. And just because we're teaching something, teaching is interesting. It's not boring. And so it's really important that we design our PowerPoints, or not have a, if you're doing a PowerPoint, which you see a lot of times I have, you see it as very visual. I rarely have bullet points. I rarely have a lot of text, because it's really not all supposed to be like that. And you can change it up. You can change the style. If you can use some free tools out there that make it easy to make your presentation itself very beautiful. And one of them is Prezi. Absolutely love Prezi. I have my students use this all the time, especially since now they have a voice feature, so they can dictate what they're doing. The other thing is Haiku Deck. It's it's really easy. It's a free iPad app. Prezi has an app as well that's free. You can do Haiku Deck on the computer now too. It's browser based as well. They have amazing templates. It's really easy to find Creative Commons pictures, so it makes it fast and easy. Teachers love it. Google Presentations, and one of the reasons Google Presentations is a lot like PowerPoint. So all your PowerPoints, you can actually upload them to Google Presentations. And you might ask, well, what makes it better? Your students, you can open it up to your students and they can contribute slides. So you can make your lecture more interactive. You can stop at points and say, okay, I want you to add a slide, go have your Google moment or your research moment. Go find this, contribute to this slide. And so that's what makes it great. You can add comments. They can have where it's hotspots with links. And then you can go and you can embed this quite easily on your wiki or your website or your Wix or whatever you have. Emaze.com, you can make 3D templates, so that's really cool. They have amazing templates and make beautiful presentations. There's so many. I've actually included when you go to the bookmarks, you'll see a Pinterest full of presentation tools. So in the end, like Robert says, if you're going to lecture and you really love your topic, then make sure it is interesting. Make sure that you put your heart into it. Make sure it is kind of like a TED Talk. And why? Because when you teach a subject, and if you feel bored by it, if it's the same lecture that you've done year after year or something, and you're bored by it, then your students are too. And that's a waste of learning, because there's that opportunity each time to really get your students to really be curious. And you don't have to love the topic, because that's unrealistic. You're not going to get every student to love math or science or something like that. But definitely, you can awaken them. You can get them curious, and you can get them to want to explore more. They did, in that one research that I showed you at the beginning, in that article, and even the research is included within the bookmarks, it was talking about STEM. It was talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. And what it was showing, that more students got in and chose subjects of science to be those careers. They chose those career paths. When their teachers were using active learning methods, when their teachers were doing things like flipping the classroom or showing them, getting them involved with the learning. And that's what we need to do. We need to get the students to get involved, so that way they can test whether or not they are good at that. Maybe they like it. And that's the problem if we just lecture too, is if we're just lecturing about science or math or English, the language, and we don't get our students, if we don't give them the opportunity to do, then how are they ever going to play around with the topic? How are they going to play around with the learning and really know whether or not they like it? And I think that's why a lot of students don't chase after those different types of career paths when they could have been really amazing at it. So give them a chance to play with the learning. If you have lectures prepared, divide them. Take every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, get them to do something with it, to play with it, to really immerse in it. You can find all the resources in the Pearl Trees, and then you can always get my links. You can connect with me in all of these places. I'm going to go ahead and I am going